This weekend, Ed and Lorraine Warren finally returned to the big screen with The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. I finally got to check it out, so let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Let me know, what did you think about The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, and how does it compare to the other two main Conjuring films? With that said, let's get started with the good. And right off the bat, once again, Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga are great in the lead two roles. The thing that elevates the main Conjuring films above most of the spin-offs are the two lead characters, Ed and Lorraine Warren, who you care about them more, you buy into their relationship more than most of the lead characters in the Conjuring spin-off films, and so much of that comes back to Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga playing them as real people. They don't feel like movie characters, they're not exaggerating things, they do very normal things while also having a very interesting day job. And in this movie, you get to see more of that. You spend a lot of time with each of them as they're kind of doing this investigation, but also you see pieces of their love story, you have them dealing with health issues, and they're so much at the center of the story that the whole thing is inherently watchable. In fact, of all the Conjuring movies, this might be the one where they are most front and center and we spend the most time with them, and since we like them, it makes for a lot of likable sequences. Other thing that I think that they did right with this film was they shifted the genre a little bit. It still has the scares, the creepy images, but it adds this element of an investigation that I think was the right thing to add in at this point in time in the franchise, whether you're talking about just the main trilogy of Conjuring films or the universe continuity as a whole. It feels just a little bit different because there is this element of going places, gathering information, interviewing people, and kind of a whodunit. We're waiting for a twist, turn, reveal in the mix of things, and it changes the formula just enough without feeling like it's abandoning what got us here in the first place. Along those same lines, when it comes to the nasty body horror, there's plenty of sequences involving people kind of snapping around and stuff. These unsettling images that you love to get out of a Conjuring movie. You get a lot of those in this film. All sorts of scenarios that build up the tension in different ways, building the unease as you're watching it. Another thing I enjoyed about this film is that it really felt like it was kind of expanding the scope of what the franchise covers. One detail that I've liked that they've done in the main Conjuring films is they really deal with how people would respond to the Warrens, and there'd be plenty of skeptics, there'd be people that believe in them, they'd be useful, but not sure what to do with them. And there's a lot of that in the film, especially when you're dealing with the court system and how would what they're doing tie into an actual trial? What would the prosecutors and judges think about that? The nice little changes things. Likewise, one thing it adds into the mix is also this sort of idea of what about when there's bad players in the mix? So you have the Warrens as the true believers trying to stop demons, but what if you have people in the mix that want to encourage that sort of thing? And so it creates kind of an adversarial situation that's a little bit more pointed than we've had in the previous films, once again in a way that fits nicely with the franchise. And I think that's what I appreciated about this film, is that we are 8 films into the Conjuring universe, and this movie found some ways to keep it fresh by adding in the investigation, kind of the perspective of the world and the court system, putting some bad actors in the mix, not as in bad thespians, not the people performing in the film, bad actors as in characters in the mix that are trying to stir things up with demons and stuff like that. I don't want to say too much about it because it ties into the plot of the film and the twists, turns, and reveals, but it was a nice way to give us more of what we like without just rehashing. It's a different type of story with all the stuff you still want from a Conjuring film. From there, let's move on to the mixed aspects of the film. The big thing here is that I felt like this movie had enough story to be like 6 to 8 episode mini-series about the Warrens. Even the way the story's structured, you kind of have this prologue about an exorcism, and then there's kind of the events that lead to what happens in this film, and then there's trials. There's like a side quest involving another city and the police force there, and they just, each of them felt like it could have been an episode that was elaborated on almost everything that happens. You could have gone more in depth because there was so much stuff and layers to what was happening, and that's not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but as I was watching it, it was just interesting to me. I was like, this feels like this should have been its own little episode of a mini-series right here. Make of that what you will, and let's move on to the bad. And the big thing that comes to mind here is that James Wan, the director of the first 2 Conjuring films, didn't return to direct, and instead they got the director of The Curse of La Llorona, one of the Conjuring spin-offs, and not one of the better Conjuring spin-offs, to direct this film. And I think you feel the absence of James Wan from beginning to end. And it's not that he made these big, gigantic mistakes that you can easily pinpoint. It's just we are able to tell the difference between the previous 2 Conjuring films were directed by a master horror director, and this is just another horror director, but not a guy in the same league as James Wan. And so it just kind of has a bit more of a generic vibe to it. There's more sequences where people turn around and then it goes "Ah!" and startles you, as if startling is the same thing as scaring you. And just the choice of the angles, the way tension is built, it just doesn't have that spark of the first 2 films. It's just more Ed and Lorraine stuff. And somewhat tying what I've been discussing here about the director and what I mentioned in the mixed section about it feeling like it had enough story to be a mini-series, there's a lot of ideas introduced about the world and different organizations out there, as well as just kind of some of the themes that are in it, that they feel like they're set up, and then maybe there's a payoff, maybe there's a moment where it ties back in, but they're not really explored. Even as you kind of get into the climax of the film and Ed is doing certain things and the way that Lorraine interacts with him, it's paying off something set up earlier, but it's not really a theme that's developed or meaningful. It's not saying anything. It's just kind of like tying 2 things together. It just felt like there's a lot of stuff that could have been developed more, and that's the big thing with this movie. I like the story, I like the main characters, I like the new elements added to the franchise and the world in general. The execution of the storytelling just felt very mediocre. And I could very easily imagine a scenario where the movie would have been significantly better if James Wan had directed. Real quick before I give you my final score on this one, be sure to join me down below in the comment section. Let me know, what did you think about The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It? Also, if you're like me, as soon as these movies end, you immediately want to know what was true and what was totally made up by the screenwriters. One way to find out is by listening to one of the books from Ed and Lorraine Warren, and you can get one of their books for free by signing up for a free trial of Audible at audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler. If you use my link down below in the description, you can get your first audiobook for free. They've got a bunch of the books from the Warrens. You can learn more about them directly from the Warrens themselves and how they claim these events took place. Link is down below in the description. In closing, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It is another solid entry in the Conjuring franchise that adds some new elements that keep things fresh while still having all the thrills and scares you expect from the franchise, and 2 great performances from our leads. But it is a movie where you could imagine a better version of it if it had a stronger director. Overall, I'm giving this one a B+ on the entertainment scale and 8 out of 10. If you like the Conjuring movies, definitely check this one out. If you're new to the franchise, start with the first one, and if you like it, move your way along to this one. Remember, if you're interested in that free audiobook and learning more about Ed and Lorraine Warren from themselves, that link is down below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.